And now to one of the hottest political races on the Suncoast. We're talking about House District 73 and the battle between Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory. The race started off with a bang before the primary when Republican Melissa Howard was forced to drop out after lying about having a college degree. That cleared the path for attorney Tommy Gregory, who is squaring off against Liv Coleman, a professor at the University of Tampa. And we welcome you both to the trapezoid tonight on a very busy news day. And we're going to start with opening statements. Each of you get a minute. And Liv, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Thanks so much, Alan, for having me on the show, and thanks so much to all your viewers for being with us here tonight. My name is Liv Coleman, and I'm an educator from a family of educators, and I'm running to make Florida Public Schools #1. I'm also a first-time candidate, so that means I've been really busy knocking on doors, attending all kinds of community events, and trying to get to know people's concerns all across the community, as well as what their hopes and vision is for the state of Florida. And one of the things that I hear is a top priority of families in the area is a concern that their students are on lockdown in the schools far too often. We need to make sure that our students are safe in schools. We need to make sure that we keep our public dollars in the public school system, and we need to make sure that our schools have the tools and infrastructure that they need to do the job. This means fully funding our schools and also taking a step away from high stakes testing so that we can have a more balanced approach to teaching in our schools. It also means fighting for majority priorities like environmental protection, affordable high quality health care for all Floridians, and common sense gun safety reforms.
All right, Liv, thank you. Tommy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alan. I'm running for the Florida House because I'm passionate about continuing to serve our country by fighting for the people of Florida. My name is Tommy Gregory, and I know how to fight. As a prosecutor, I fought for victims in the courtroom by prosecuting murderers, drug dealers, rapists, and child predators and put them in prison where they belong. And my wife and I both graduated from the Air Force Academy, served 20 years on active duty, and deployed multiple times. As a JAG, I gave the legal advice and authorization for dozens of strikes on Taliban and al-Qaeda terrorists. But now our democracy is under attack at home by people that believe that big government is the answer to any problem, or that we can tax and regulate our way to prosperity. We need to elect leaders that will fight for us, that will defend our liberties, increase our prosperity, and enforce the rule of law. That's what I'll do, and that's why I'm running.
All right, excellent. When we come back, the candidates will begin answering our questions. What will be the first question? We'll find out in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to the House 73 debate between Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory. Our first question tonight is not necessarily about this race, but it's about our politics. We've been reporting this terrible hurricane, Hurricane Michael, that's devastating the northern part of our state, the Panhandle. And today there has been some criticism that obviously Mayor Gillum, the Democratic nominee, is dealing with his city, the city of Tallahassee, but the Republican Ron DeSantis is still launching attack ads on this campaign today of all days. Same thing with Bill Nelson. He is still running campaign negative ads against Rick Scott on all days where the governor is doing other things. And Tommy, let me start with you. If you had the opportunity, and you do right now, what would you say to Senator Nelson and Congressman DeSantis about running these ads on a day like today?
Well, I don't know, how the timing of those ads worked out, Alan. When and who is really behind those ads. I know from my own personal experience. In fact, I brought with me today an ad that reached my neighbor's mailbox, and I know it didn't come from my opponent, but it came from people that were backing her. And frankly, it's troubling for a couple of reasons. One, because it came out on today of all days, and two, because it's packed full of things which are quite frankly clearly false. There's allegations in here that say things like I voted for millions and billions in tax cuts for the wealthiest 1%. Statements that I oppose pay increases for Florida teachers. Things that can't possibly be true because I've never been elected, and can't be true because they're not. Because in every debate and every public forum I've ever participated in, I've said exactly the opposite about pay increases for teachers. So it's hard to really criticize either of those candidates for negative campaign ads because we don't know who sent them. Is it a dark money problem that went into those ads and pushed them out? But I do think we would all agree that today is not the day for those type of ads to be hitting.
All right, Liv, I'll let you respond to that, but also talk about the attack ads from Ron DeSantis and Senator Nelson on today of all days.
Well, as an educator, I have a strong commitment to fact-based, data-driven analysis as well as fact-based, data-driven ads. So I think that's a standard that we should hold all of ourselves and all of the groups associated with us or backing us to that standard. But it also means a standard of taking care of our communities. And if there are attack ads that are being launched on a day where we should all be coming together and focusing on priorities for making sure that people are in safe positions and making sure that people are taking care of their neighbors, then we should be focused on that instead of attacking each other.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. Our debate between the State House District 73 candidates continues. Welcome back to the House 73 debate between Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory. And Liv, let me direct this question to you. After the Parkland shooting, the legislature did pass the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school safety bill. It does a lot of things, including raising the age in terms of purchases of some weapons and also money for SROs. What is the one thing that was not accomplished in that piece of legislation when it comes to school safety that you would like to see?
The thing I would most like to see changed is the expansion of universal background checks. Well over 90% of Floridians support universal background checks as a part of a package of common sense gun safety reforms. I think there's more to be done even beyond that, but that would be the first place to start.
Okay, Tommy?
Well, the one thing that I would have added, I think your question is what would you have added to the bill, and I know what the legislators at the time wanted to add, and that was more funding. But that tragic shooting, that tragic situation occurred near the end of the legislative session when there was only so many dollars left in our budget, which of course constitutionally is required to be balanced. So I think they did the best they could finding money, and they put $400 million into school safety programs. But I think the thing all legislators could agree on in a bipartisan way is that we need more funding to keep our schools safe.
Let me ask you about this because this did come up after Parkland in terms of assault weapons. Would you be for or against banning assault type weapons in Florida?
Well, that's an easy question for me, Alan, and it's because I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe that words have meaning when they're written, and that if we don't enforce the words as written and look to what the spirit and intent of those words were, then we're wasting our time and we're really just subjecting ourselves to the whims of whoever happens to be in power at the time. My wife and I both served 20 plus years in the military. Between the two of us wore the uniform for about 50 years. And I can tell you, we believe and we know that our country is the greatest in the history of the world because we have a lot of rights in our Constitution, and I'm always going to defend those rights.
All right, same question to you, Liv. Would you be for or against banning assault weapons in Florida?
I would support an assault weapons ban. We don't need weapons of war in our schools, in our movie theaters, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. They cause just too much damage. They can create incredible injuries because of the high muzzle velocity. And we need to make sure that these most dangerous weapons are off our streets. And I think one way we could actually start with such a ban, there's already a state senator who proposed to start out with a moratorium for 2 years on new sales of assault weapons and to do a research study. I support that.
We have to take another break. We are just getting warmed up. Our debate between the State House 73 candidates will continue after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the House 73 debate between Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory. Red tide has been one of those issues over the last couple of months which have really devastated the Suncoast, and there's been a lot of debate. It's a natural occurring phenomenon. We all understand that. But the debate is whether or not we have done anything to make this problem worse. Tommy, let me start with you. Look, your party has been in control of the legislature and the governor's mansion for the last 20 years. Has state government done enough to either stop nutrients from getting into our water supply that adds to red tide, or is this unrelated to the governor and the legislature or even local governments?
Well, Alan, the first thing you pointed out is that it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. And the question is really whether anybody is doing enough. You can't ask, you can't narrow it down to 20 years and say, have the Republicans done enough? The question is, have we done enough since human beings really have been in Florida? And I think scientists would tell us without dispute that if you took all the humans out of Florida, you would still have red tide here. I think that Republicans are showing true leadership on this, and that is they are running to the problem. They're not running away from it. They are saying loudly and clearly, we are concerned. We know that Florida depends for both tourism and agriculture on clean water. We've got to have it, and red tide hurts us, really hurts our economy. I think Visit Sarasota said that 90% of our local businesses have suffered from red tide. The things that the Republican leadership certainly supports, and I think, again, we should have bipartisan support here, are continuing to do things that remove the nutrients from the water. The things that scientists tell us that the algae is feeding on. And we can do those by continuing the programs that Sarasota County and Tallahassee have done. That's supporting septic to sewer conversions, that's supporting water storage and treatment, stormwater runoff, collection and treatment, and then of course demanding and really working with our federal counterparts to repair the Herbert Hoover Dike.
All right, Liv, same question to you.
I think there's really been a problem under the current administration in the last 20 years of one-party rule, because we've seen especially, we've seen erosion of water quality standards for monitoring water quality. We've seen water management budgets slashed, and we've seen a lack of protections to make sure that we don't have leakage from septic systems that gets into our waterways. So we need common sense oversight over our waterways, and we also need to just get back to basics. For example, Florida Florida voters supported Amendment 1 in 2014, the Land and Water Conservation Amendment, to set aside land for conservation and to protect critical watersheds. And because we're not funding that every year like we should be in accordance with the voters' wills, we get extra runoff in our water streams. We don't have protection of estuaries. We don't have protection of the marshes that filter out the nutrients as they get into the bay. So we need to honor the will of the voters, and we need to protect our environment at every step of the way. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club of Florida because I'm a strong supporter and environmental champion.
All right, let's get back to the issue of education. In fact, earlier this week, we did a whole show on the education plans of both candidates for governor, and they are radically different. Governor Gillum, or Mayor Gillum is proposing raising corporate taxes and adding $1 billion to the public education system to give school teachers a raise. Congressman DeSantis wants to also look for efficiencies to put more money in the classroom, but also expand school vouchers. What's wrong with Liv, giving families and students the opportunity to go to private schools that they may not on their own be able to afford?
I'm supportive of the principle of school choice, but I think there's much more we can do with it in the context of a traditional public school system. I think it's great to work with local leaders to promote options such as magnet schools and other kind of community-driven priorities. And there is also a role to play for charter schools, so they can meet the needs of special kinds of students or provide special distinctive kinds of programming. That might be, an example would be Manatee School for the Arts or the Sarasota Military Academy. So I support school choice, but I think we don't need to be, we should be keeping public dollars in the public school system and not diverting it for for-profit entities.
And same question to you, Tommy, including the fact that we don't have enough teachers in Florida. So shouldn't they be getting a pay raise in order to attract and retain new teachers?
Well, as I said at the beginning, Alan, I support a pay raise for teachers. The question is how much and how do we fit it into the budget? But I think you can find bipartisan support for that. And I'm happy to hear that Liv agrees with me that school choice and local home school board decisions really lead to great results, both in Sarasota and Manatee County. For our charter schools and private schools, we are starting to lead the state and in many cases the country because we offer so many school choices.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second, because we were all at Tiger Bay a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to see you both take part in the panel there, and there was a question about socialism and whether the Democrats are now running from Florida to California on a platform of socialism. Liv, let me ask you straight out. Are you a socialist?
Alan, I'm glad you asked. I'm an educator, so I like to keep my message simple. I'm a supporter of free markets, but at the same time, to have sustainable free markets in the long run, we need to make sure that we have protections in place for seniors, for working families, for students, for consumers, for everybody in our community. And so we need to make sure that we don't have corporations running amok, but we keep in place these kinds of common sense protections.
Tommy, I'm not going to ask you if you're a socialist, but I will point out that when you're talking about shared responsibility, when you talk, whether it's about police or firefighter or Social Security, those are socialist from the point of view that we all pay taxes for the common good.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Our system of government necessitates and requires that we provide common services. The question really is whether or not we are shocked and appalled by the fact that candidates around the state and across the country have unabashedly embraced socialist platforms. That worries me. I've lived and deployed all around the world, Alan, and I know that countries that embrace socialism and form these great big governments really destroy prosperity and create an environment of dependency.
Liv, let me stay with that for a moment because, there's been a lot of discussion in terms of California and what it does there, and also candidates from New York State. But are you concerned that that Democrats and candidates like yourself are basically being tagged by the socialist banner there, and that a lot of people, maybe in the progressive community, really want things like that in terms of Medicaid, Medicare for all, and so forth?
I'm a supporter of a free market system, and I think there is more we can do for market-based approaches. But I think it's reasonable to rethink. We have too many people who are plagued with problems in our healthcare system, so I think it does deserve a rethink and a new approach. But I think one of the things I'm most disturbed about in the federal government right now is actually a move away from free market principles towards tariffs and trade wars. And I think there's more we can do to actually get back to basics.
And Tommy, let me ask you this, because in some states like Ohio, with a Republican governor, they took Medicaid expansion, which has helped a lot of people in states like that. Would you revisit that here? Because there are suggestions that could really help the problem in terms of healthcare in Florida.
Well, I think the legislature should always revisit past decisions to make sure they made the right decision, but I don't think expanding Medicaid is likely to lead to the right answer for Florida. Florida already takes in $15 billion more a year from the federal government than they're sending in. And, frankly, the federal government is addicted to deficit spending. That's their drug of choice, and they can't move away from it. Florida has got to find a way to set up our own healthcare system that's not dependent on the whims of the legislators in Washington, D.C.
Okay, we have to take another quick break. Our debate between the State House District 73 candidates will continue after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back to the House 73 debate between Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory. And Tommy, let me ask you this. You have a lot of priorities if you get elected to go to Tallahassee, but what would be the one thing that you would like to accomplish more than anything else?
Well, the one thing that we've always got to do is make sure that we are defending our constitutional rights in any legislation we pass. I think it would be a mistake to have as a goal, for example, to be up there and to go to Tallahassee and pass as much legislation as possible. The goal should be to, reach out to subject matter experts, get their advice, make thoughtful, data-driven decisions that help Floridians, and in this case, the residents of District 73. The two items that I would be focused on would be infrastructure and education, because we know that businesses need improvements in infrastructure, whether you're talking about the transportation corridors or port enhancements. And we know that education is really the key for our children's future, so that they can contribute in the environment and the jobs that are needed now and in the future. So infrastructure and education is where I would focus.
Okay, Liv, same question to you. If there was one thing that you could accomplish if you were elected to as state representative, what would that be?
It would be to continue to work to make Florida public schools #1. And I think that means fully funding our public schools, but also backing away from high stakes testing. When I talk to parents, when I talk to teachers, principals, sometimes even students themselves, people are really just sick and tired of the culture of high stakes testing and the incredible pressure that puts on our students. I hear stories of 8-year-olds who are throwing up at night before the exams. I hear stories of first graders who are afraid already about what it's going to be like to take their 3rd grade exam. I think it's better to educate in a supportive, positive way, especially for the younger grades. And of course, there's a role for testing and assessment in our schools, but I think it just needs to be done in a more balanced approach. And that way, our teachers can also not just teach to the tests, but also foster critical thinking and communication and creativity.
Did you want to respond to that?
Alan, I'll just respond to that to say, of course, we need to move away from an environment based on this high-stake testing. We have to have some type of testing. I agree with Liv. We have to have some way to measure the students' performance. But really, this high-stake testing was started a long time ago, before Liv moved to the state of Florida under a Democratic governor. So it's time to move away from that, realize the mistakes of the past, and reduce the stress and anxiety on our kids.
Let me ask you this, Tommy. One of Congressman DeSantis' surrogates was here earlier this week, and you know, Mayor Gillum has been talking about raising teacher pay to $50,000 a year. The DeSantis campaign said that principals should have the ability to negotiate separately with teachers for merit wage increases, and the question would be, that's usually something that's handled by the union collective bargaining. If you did something like that, would you be doing away with teacher unions?
Well, I'm not sure how you'd have to negotiate some sort of new agreement with the unions to figure out a way to do that, but I really love it as an idea to put the power in the hands of the people that are supervising our teachers, for them to be able to negotiate bonuses or higher salaries for our best performing teachers and reward them for that good work.
Liv, same question to you again. Is that a good idea? And B, would that not undercut collective bargaining?
I think, well, unions have been under attack in the state of Florida for some time, including teachers' unions in the last legislative session. So I'd like to continue to, respect the rights of teachers to their collective bargaining, but we do need clearly more funding for our teachers and higher salaries. So I think there is a role to play, even continue to be at the local level in negotiating those issues.
And the other question that goes back to school safety is, should teachers have the ability to arm themselves in the classroom, Tommy?
Yes, I think they should have the authority to do it, although I don't think that you will see them do it. I think it would require a very limited set of circumstances, a very limited set of teachers, in my mind, would qualify and have the experience, the skill set, and the training to carry a weapon. And I would only do that, in coordination with law enforcement.
Liz, same question to you.
I can't imagine, as an educator, ever being put in a position where one would want to be armed and in a position where you'd have to shoot potentially a student in your own classroom. I don't support arming teachers at all.
Okay. We'll be back with our candidates' closing statements, and our candidates join us for their closing arguments. And Tommy, we're going to start with you.
Alan, I believe that we are the greatest country in the history of the world because we chose to be a nation that values individual responsibility over big government. The question on November 6th is whether the voters agree with Republicans and still agree with the values and principles of the Founding Fathers, or whether the voters agree with the Democrats and want to give more money and more power to the government, and then trust those bickering politicians in Tallahassee and D.C. to spend our money wisely while trying to take care of everyone and create new programs. I've worked with and for general officers, CEOs, fighter pilots, police officers, and even astronauts in high-profile, high-pressure situations. And as I said earlier, I know firsthand from my life experience that countries that experiment with big government destroy prosperity and create a culture of dependency. My name is Tommy Gregory. I'm ready to work for the people of District 73 in the Florida House.
Liv, you get the last word.
All right, thank you. My name is Liv Coleman, and I'm an educator from a family of educators. And I think being an educator, I have a chance to be in touch with working families in our community and students. And I have a leadership style as an educator that's based in collaboration and leads towards persuasion, toward data-driven, fact-based analyses, and an effort to just get to know the issues really well and do the best possible job, regardless of what endorsements a person may have or what special interests might be behind the scenes, to just try to work really hard on behalf of Manatee and Sarasota communities. I'm proud to be a champion of the environment, endorsed by the Florida chapter of the Sierra Club. I'm endorsed by the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. I'm a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate. And I also want to be as open and accessible as possible to voters. So I have taken the town hall pledge. I pledge to hold a town hall at least once a month so that we can stay in touch with voters, so we can hear their concerns, and we can make sure that we're fostering community dialogue on topics of vision and interest to everybody. So it's just been a thrill getting to know people across the community as part of running for this race, and I hope to have the honor to serve everyone in this community in Tallahassee. Thanks so much.
And we want to thank you both for being here tonight. And we want to thank Democrat Liv Coleman and Republican Tommy Gregory for joining us tonight. And that is all the time we have for this evening. I'm Alan Cohn. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.